and this is a meeting of the Shrewsbury Conservation Commission. As a preliminary matter, this is John Ostrowski, Chair of the Conservation Commission. Please permit me to confirm that all members and support staff are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Martha Gatch.
Here.
Jason Port.
Here.
Bob Jakes.
Here.
Ken Polito.
Here.
And support staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Brad Stone.
Here.
And I take it we don't have Andy here tonight, right, Brad?
Right,
Andy?
he's not here.
He's not here, okay. This open meeting of the Conservation Commission is being conducted remotely consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. This order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Shrewsbury Conservation Commission is convening by video conference via Google Meet as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that the meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer unless asked by the chairperson or the staff person. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. The chair will introduce each presenter of an agenda item. After they conclude their presentation, the chair will go down the line of members first, and then to support staff, and lastly to the public for questions or comments. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Remember that unless a document is being shared, your camera feed is triggered by your speaking or background noise. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that generates accurate minutes. The chair will ask members of the public who wish to speak to identify their names and addresses only. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. All right, with that said, we'll move on to our first item. It's to review and approve minutes, and there are no minutes to approve or review. Item 2, sign bills. Brad, did we get our traditional bills in this month?
I haven't seen any, but I can follow up on that.
All right. And you'll call us and we'll come in and sign if necessary. All right, moving on to item 3, our meetings and hearings. Our first hearing is actually a continued hearing, and it's regarding the notice of intent filed by Little Creek Realty Trust for renovations to an existing daycare facility at 314 Grafton Street. Do we have a presenter here tonight?
Yes, Arthur Allen from Ecotech is here.
Okay, Arthur. Arthur, just for the record, can you just give us a quick summary of the project and then address where we left off last month?
Sure. As you're aware, this project was continued from the May 14th public hearing for renovations to the existing commercial daycare facility at 314 Grafton Street. Renovations include a pavilion, tennis courts, and a pool facility, modifications to the expansion of the parking lot, and repaving of part of the driveway, along with stormwater management improvements. We discussed the project at the last meeting. There were comments raised by Brad Stone. We agreed to continue to address those comments. And they included a question as to whether the filing fee paid was adequate. I looked into the fee and noted to Brad that we had paid for the commercial building, which includes all associated infrastructure, stormwater, etc. And Brad, by email, agreed that the filing fee was adequate. The other issues pertain to stormwater management improvements over what was proposed. I put Brad in touch with Carl Hulkren, the professional engineer from Quinn Engineering who designed the project. He discussed it with Brad, and as a result, there were revised plans submitted with a revision date of June 10th, 2020. I'll just mention what those were, and then I'll turn it over to Carl if he has any. I believe he's on the call if he has any additional comments. But basically just the two hydrodynamic separators at the proposed stormwater outlets were changed out and replaced with storm scepter separators. And then the outlet at the northern end of the site was extended with a grass swale and riprap check dams to attenuate velocity. So basically it's the same plan with just relatively minor modifications to improve the stormwater discharges. And Carl, do you have anything to add to that?
No, that's a good summary. Thanks, Art.
Thank
You all
you.
set, Art, for questions?
Yes, yes, sir.
Martha?
No questions.
Jason?
No questions.
Bob?
All set.
Ken?
No questions.
Brad?
I'm all set.
All right, is anyone in on this conference with any questions or comments? All right, I don't hear anybody commenting, so we will close this hearing.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thanks,
Thank
Art.
you.
Thanks, Carl. Okay, moving on to our second item. It's another continued public hearing. It's regarding the notice of intent filed by Bayview Realty Trust for the demolition of an existing residential dwelling and construction of two new single-family dwellings at 51 to 53 Bayview Drive. Do we have a presenter here tonight?
Bill Hannigan from Hannigan Engineering.
All right, Bill. Why don't you do the same, Bill? Give us a quick summary of the project and then where we left off at last month's meeting.
At the last meeting, Chris Anderson from our office made a presentation of the project, went through various items on the plan. The plan is a existing two-family dwelling on Bayview Drive that's going to be demolished, and a new two-family dwelling is to be constructed in its place. Part of the work was some retaining walls to make up the grade from the lake level up to the living level. Two retaining wall systems were going to be installed. Additionally, there would be roof drain systems and a E1 system for each unit that would provide sewage to the street. The plans were reviewed by the planning board and they've been subsequently approved by them. Brad had done a comment letter regarding the project. I believe that all of the comments that we've reviewed have been resubmitted and addressed. There were items in there such as the benchmarks in relative to the topographic datum, utilizing the NAV 88 system, which we now have in place, showing the floodplain information, both per the firm map and per the local 359 elevation of Quincy, and updates to different construction aspects of it relative to the tree plantings and the requirements for ALB resistant products to be used in the property. I'm just going to go through the list here. I believe that was it. We did have a question about the construction sequencing for the project. And what we've asked is that we wait till we have the site contractor in place to be able to review that both with the agent as well as with the various department heads as we go forward. So that one aspect of it, I believe, has been asked to be a condition of approval.
Okay. Are you ready for questions, Bill?
Sure.
Martha?
Sorry, having trouble with my mute. I don't have any questions.
Jason?
No questions from me.
Bob?
No questions.
Ken?
Was there a question last meeting relative to the, how the site was going to be split up? And if there were cross easements and whatnot, and how would that affect the order?
There are no cross easements.
Go ahead, Bill.
There are no cross easements. It's one property, it's one project, so a condominium form of ownership. So there wouldn't be any cross easements needed for the project.
Okay, and then I think, did you guys send a picture of a downed tree?
Yeah, apparently, either last night or over the weekend, a tree down towards the lakefront area fell, and you could see by one of the pictures, you could see that the entire trunk system was hollow. So that we'll probably have to work with Brad on how we're going to take that tree out and dispose of that. I'm not exactly sure which tree it was. I know that Bob Haddon's on the line too, if he wants to chime in on that one, but I know it was one right against the shore.
Bill, it was up on the southern edge of the property.
Okay.
Can you remove it sooner than later?
Our goal is to get it out of there ASAP.
Okay,
Anything else, Ken?
no, I'm all set.
Brad?
So the only comment I have is I don't have any issue with waiting until closer to construction for the sequencing. I understand the engineer's point, wanting to have a specific contractor's take on that. But I would like a brief narrative on that as a condition, as well as have that in place prior to the issuance of any building permits.
That's agreeable.
Okay. Anything else, Brad? You're all set?
All set.
All right. Does anyone in the public have any questions or comments on this hearing?
John,
Yes.
I would just make sure that, that the tree that's in the lake is removed sooner than later. I just like that written down or in the order that needs to be taken out.
Is that a safety hazard right now, Ken? Is it?
Well, it looks like it's out pretty far, and I tend to think it's going to cause an issue.
So in other words, it's going to take a little while before the order of conditions takes effect because of the wait time. So are you recommending that we allow them to do that right now, separate from this hearing, basically?
Yes.
Brad, do you see any problem with that as a safety?
No, I don't see a problem with that. Just have somebody go in and pull it out.
Yeah. And in terms of I know Bill said the roots were pretty much out of the ground when it laid over. So is the intent to wait to address the roots either with a stump grinding or pulling when the project gets underway, or would that be done at this point, Bill?
I think it would probably make sense to treat this as one item and do everything needs to be done with this tree right now.
All right. And it sounds like it's close to the shoreline, so maybe a stump grinding would be more appropriate.
I'm not sure if you can get a stump grinder in it. It looks to me like it's right at the shoreline, so we might need to get a machine in there to pull out, maybe a small mini in there just to pull out the. We'll try to leave whatever we can, but I think realistically, getting a stump grinder in there is not going to work.
Okay.
Hey, Bill, can I comment on that? The tree was hollowed at the base. So it just split off of the stump. So the stump and the root system is still there. And that was actually an area that we weren't going to disturb. So it might be best that we just get that tree out of there and leave that area the way it is.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if you leave the stump alone, it's fairly well rotted from the pictures, and just remove the tree, I think that would be enough for now until the order's in place. That way you're not making any disturbance without the siltation and erosion.
That sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, Bill, you're amenable to that?
Yep, that sounds fine.
Okay, so we've already gone to the public for any questions or comments, and we didn't hear any. So we will close this hearing.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Bill. The next hearing is a new hearing, and Martha?
Notice is hereby given in accordance with the provisions of General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, that Taylor Fontaine, 4 Stony Brook Lane, Shrewsbury, has filed a notice of intent to construct an addition and add a garage to an existing home at 4 Stony Brook Lane. Public hearing will be held on the above notice at 7 p.m. on Thursday evening, Tuesday evening, June 23rd, 2020.
All right, do we have a presenter?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, James Tatro here, representing the Fontaines.
All right, James, it's your show.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, the property in question is at that street address 4 Stony Brook Lane on the north side of the road. The property contains a couple of different resource areas, but in some, and I'll get to them and describe them, but the Fontaines simply propose to build a garage and an addition, an area of their property that's previously been altered immediately adjacent to the existing home.
Yep. James, can I stop you 1 second? Do you have a drawing that you could post to the site so we can follow along with you?
I'm not sure how I would do that. I guess I was thinking
okay, maybe Brad
might have that. But
Brad, do you have one?
Yep, I can share one, John. Just give me 1 second. There's a lot of background noise. I just want to clean up some of these mics.
Okay.
Oh, that sounds better. All right, let me get to it.
Yep, that's it.
Okay, James, can you
Sure.
describe based on what we're seeing right here?
Sure. What you see there, you see existing foundation hatched in one direction. That's the existing home. The existing home does not have a garage, unlike most of the homes in that neighborhood. The Fontaines want to add on a garage and a small room in the back, neither of which will be as close to the wetland behind them as the existing home already is. There is a wetland behind them associated with a perennial stream, an unnamed stream, which flows from Woodchuck Road to Lamplighter Drive. And that stream is in fact besides having a wetland, also contains a FEMA flood zone area with calculated flood elevations of 513 just in front of Lamplighter Drive and 514 back by Woodchuck. So the implied 100-year flood elevation behind the Fontaines is somewhere in the 513 and change range. And if you look at the behind their house, you see a scalloped line indicating the existing tree line, the extent of their yard. That tree line occurs around just above the 514 elevation. So again, the flood zone is entirely behind their yard and probably extends just a little beyond the wetland shown. That boundary of wetland shown was what was the boundary determined back when the subdivision was created. So yes, we acknowledged that this was a line from quite a while ago, but the Fontaines only proposed to create a garage in addition to their home in what was previously the yard area immediately beside their home. They don't propose any regrading of the property. They propose to put a erosion control barrier at their backyard before this construction begins. And again, as I say, the proposed addition and the garage are farther from the wetland than the existing home. I would just note also, again, that because this is a perennial stream behind them, really almost their entire property is in riverfront area. We are asking that the commission consider this to be redevelopment work, and we think it's a clear case for that because the bits of construction, the garage and addition, are proposed in what was very clearly altered yard immediately adjacent to their home. So I guess I will leave it at that and try and answer any questions.
Martha? Martha, do you have any questions?
What was the date of the original wetlands demarcation?
It was circa 1995. I don't have the exact date right in front of me, but it was approximately that vintage.
Okay. All right, that's all I got for now. Thank you.
Jason?
I think I'd like to hear from Brad if we had any more information about the site or if you had a chance to take a look at it at all.
Brad, do you want to make your comments now?
Sure. Can you hear me, John?
Yep.
Okay. I have to do something on my computer here real quick. Okay. So I have not actually seen the site. I did look into the history here. I was somewhat familiar with the Fox Farm subdivision when it was under construction as well. So in terms of, Mr. Tatro mentioned redevelopment. I'd have to actually see what's there, but if it's the conversion of lawn to these accessory structures, that's not really redevelopment. That's actually riverfront disturbance still, because it would be continued degradation. So the numbers do have to be accounted for there. The other question that I had, well, number one, I do think the wetland line itself is pretty outdated, so it should be double checked and reflagged just to see if anything has changed. But of more concern to me with this particular filing would be accounting for the riverfront work, knowing that the Rivers Bill probably wasn't even around back when this was initially filed. So one of my questions for the engineer was, how was the riverfront determined for this if there was an additional wetland delineation done? And then also with respect to the floodplain, I think it was indicated that the topo came from ArcGIS, which isn't always necessarily too accurate. It was topo that was done from roughly 20 years ago. Even if it's not disturbed in that amount of time, the elevation could be off a little bit. So it's worth just double checking and seeing where that floodplain shows up as well. Although I do think, and I'd be fairly certain that the proposed structure just would probably be outside of that Again, I do think that, number one, I'd like to see the site just to see the areas for the additions, just to see what may or may not be degraded there from the Riversville perspective, and then making sure that everything was delineated appropriately to help with that determination and assessment too.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, just to respond to those couple points.
Yep.
The perennial stream location shown is taken from aerial photographs of recent vintage, not 1995. And from my, we were able to actually get a very clear fix on one bank, not as much on the other. And I went out there and put a tape to the stream, and we ascribed that same width along the stream length behind the fontaines. With regard to the construction in the riverfront area, even if it was deemed to be, well, I guess I should step back first. It's very clear that it's all lawn and it's area from which the natural topsoil had been removed. In fact, if you look on the area of the garage on that plan, you can see the dash dot line showing the existing driveway. In fact, most of what the garage will be over is the actual pavement presence of the driveway. And again, on this entire 45,429 square foot lot, 10% of that is 4,000 square feet, and this alteration is a little over 800 square feet. And again, I just think that the nature of this over pavement and the lawn immediately adjacent to the house, it is definitely area that has been altered from natural condition. That representation of the tree line behind the house, the scalloped line, was done from on-ground survey. And I would note that we had on-ground survey immediately adjacent to the existing house from location done before. We matched that to the town's GIS. Once you got more than about 10 feet away from the house, that's where our shots at that time ended. So we were confident definitely about the elevations at the house itself, though Brad is right, less so once you get to the edge of the backyard and into the wetlands. So the exact point of that 514 contour is less certain, but we are actually very sure of the back of the house being at 518.
Okay. Jason, do you have any further comments, having heard what Brad had to say?
I think my only comment to follow up to Martha's, and based on what Brad has discussed, is, I don't know how comfortable I am with the current delineation, right? I mean, if it was delineated in 95, even though, you went out and walked the site, I don't know how accurate that is today without having delineated.
Okay.
That's my only comment.
Okay. Bob? Did we lose Bob? Brad, can you see him there? Let's go to Ken right now then and see if Bob comes back on.
I'm all set.
All right.
Bob is there. Bob is here. He may just have trouble with being muted.
Bob, can you hear us? Well, so it looks like he's having trouble.
Looks like he was trying to dial in by phone,
Okay.
John. So give him 1 second.
All right.
It looks like he's unmuted.
Right, but he had issues with his PC speaker microphone before, excuse me. So he may be trying to dial in with the phone to use that for the mic instead.
Gotcha.
Is that Bob joining right now?
How about now?
Yeah, we can hear you now, Bob. Okay, why don't you
Sorry about that.
give your
So
comments?
on this matter, the only thing that's persuasive to me, because I think it really is as Mr. Chicho says, a fairly straightforward project that's not going to result in additional impacts of great consequence. My only concern is that our issuance of an order of conditions could be construed as contemporary approval of a 20-year-old delineation. So I agree with Jason and Martha that we really should straighten out or determine whether or not this delineation is correct.
Okay,
I'm less persuaded about the other arguments about the riverfront, but I think this delineation is important because it restarts the clock today, not in 1995.
okay. And James, I tend to agree with what's been said. And also on the riverfront, I know you have a little bit of a disagreement about it, whether it being redevelopment or not. And I believe the comment you had made initially for the garage was that it was going in a lawned area. And then on counter to Brad's comment, you then said it was mainly a paved driveway. So just for the record, because it is in riverfront, you should also just run the numbers. I mean, you gave us a preliminary accounting of it tonight with over 4,000 square feet allowed, and this being only 800 square feet proposed. You should have the balance sheet somewhere denoted in your filing to address that, as well as the new wetland line or reaffirmation of the existing one, whichever's holds true. Let's see if anybody from the public is here tonight with any questions or comments. Is there anyone from the public who would like to make a comment tonight? Okay, I don't hear anybody, so we'll assume there are no comments from the public tonight. James, it's looking like you're going to need a continuation. Would you request one?
I will request a continuance then, Mr. Chairman, to your next meeting.
Okay, so we will continue this hearing until our next meeting, which is July 21st, 2020.
I will send you a letter explicitly making that request.
Okay, James. Thank you for presenting tonight. Okay. Moving on to our next hearing, Martha.
Okay. Oh, hang on, I just lost it.
64.
I got it. Now.
Okay.
Notice is hereby given in accordance with the provisions of General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, that Scheit Sebastian and Sonia Sebastian Vadum Cherry have filed a notice of intent to extend their backyard at 64 Cherry Street. A public hearing will be held on the above notice at 7 p.m. on Tuesday evening, June 23rd, 2020, and I apologize if I have butchered your names. Please correct me.
All right. Do we have a presenter tonight?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Again, it's me, James Tatro.
Okay, James.
And I want to begin this presentation for notice of intent filed for 64 Cherry Street by first apologizing to the commission on behalf of the Sebastians. They were not aware of the rules and altered their backyard based on something someone had told them, which turned out to be false. And I just want to make absolutely clear that there's no misconception that they were flouting the rules or ignoring the rules. They actually very carefully thought they had a certain amount of area that they could alter, and actually taped off their house, and were trying to be sure that they didn't alter anything they weren't supposed to, that they were under a mistaken conception of the regulations. So I want to apologize to the commission on their behalf. What they did is they altered an area of about 5,900 square feet in their backyard in the buffer zone. They did not, though there is riverfront area on the back of their property, they did not get into it, and they did not alter wetland. This wetland line is from back in 2014, I believe, when these lots were first permitted, and the riverfront area determination was from back then. It was the same riverfront area determination as on the nearby Adams Farm project.
James, can I stop you for a second? Brad, can you pull that drawing up?
Yep, that's it. So again, this is for number 64 Cherry Street. And you see just a little behind their house, the thick dashed line, that's the limit of the 100-foot buffer zone. Just within it, from the initial construction, you see the well. And you see it doesn't show up too well on the PDFs, I apologize, but a dashed, sort of thick dashed dotted line that almost runs through the well. That was the limit of their yard when at the time of initial construction and when the Sebastians bought this home. Again, they were under a misconception of what they were allowed to do and extended their yard backwards towards where you see a proposed erosion control barrier with now some line of boulders in front of it. They will revegetate the area just beyond that, and they will are asking for a order of conditions which will allow them to vegetate the area between that line of boulders and, again, that, I'm sorry, it's a little bit hard to discern, that grayish dashed line that runs through the well. Again, the one that goes through the well is the exactly as the cursor is tracing. It was the limit of their yard before, and back further away from the house where there is a line of boulders and a proposed erosion control barrier is the extent to which they were extending their yard. So this proposal is just for work in the buffer zone, is not for riverfront area, and is for them to just create more yard on their property. They should have filed this as a notice of intent before doing so, but again, I apologize on their behalf. They just weren't aware of the rules. I guess I'll just leave it at that. And take any questions again in regard to 64 Cherry Street.
Martha.
James, could you please show me, or perhaps Brad can trace it out, what are, I'm not clear as to what they're proposing to revegetate and how.
Sure. Again, from that, it shows up as a grayish line that runs through the well. They're proposing to revegetate further away from the house to the, it's actually you see a proposed tree planting and a line of erosion control back near where there's a corner of the property.
So,
again,
so
that's where
okay.
Yep, where the cursor was just then.
Okay. So just one tree?
It's actually a very small area that after talking to the Sebastians, because I know the commission's policy is to try and have no work within 15 feet. The idea was to revegetate the area within 15 feet of the wetlands. Because they got within a couple feet of that flag F68, which is the one closest to the back of their house.
Okay, and those flags are the
2014 delineation done with when these 3 lots were constructed, the ones that you can see.
and the rest of it will be lawn?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Jason,
Yes, so I'm a bit confused, right? So we've got 68 Cherry Street, correct? That's what we're,
That's the
Next
abutter. We're
door.
looking at 64.
but I see we're going to talk about 68 next.
We will, yeah.
Okay, so 64, and I'm just taking, all right, so they're proposing a tree. Okay. All right, well, I'll wait. And are these boulders placed, James?
Yeah,
I think
well,
these
not as yet. The proposal
okay,
is
this
to,
is the proposal, all right.
to use them as just something to delimit the extent of yard. It's not expected that the boulders or really any barrier can prevent anybody from encroachment, from walking into the wetlands or doing something. It's just as a visual delimiter of the extent of yard permitted.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have any more comments right this second.
okay. Bob,
James, have you provided a specification for the boulders in terms of size and separation?
We said, trying to find the note, we said that they had to be at least 2-foot dimension, and I believe we were saying 8 foot on center. Do I have that? Oh, here we go. It's actually on the notes on the right side of the sheet. Line of boulders at least 2 foot in size, and no more than 8 feet apart. I'm sorry, is what I said. If the commission would have a preference for a different dimension and separation, I'm sure the applicants would live with that.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if that's, these boulders would have to be hauled in, right?
Yes, there's no stones really on site.
All right, we can worry about that in the conditions. Thank you, I'm all set.
Ken,
I just have a question. When we originally approved the orders for this property, why didn't, I think there was a reason why we didn't clear any closer to the wetlands. I don't remember, but.
Well, we actually, Ken, part of that actually was that on the adjacent lot, I don't want to make 68 the point of discussion, but on the adjacent lot, we very intentionally stayed out of the riverfront area with that filing, and we simply didn't want to propose a very deep lot on backyard on number 64 where it was much shorter on 68, and just thinking that in the end it wouldn't kind of last, and so we had them both with similar depth backyards off of the homes.
All right.
you all set, Ken?
Yep.
Brad,
Okay, so just a few quick things. First of all, Mr. Tatro can stop apologizing for the homeowners. I think if anything, this is more or less the poster child for how enforcement should go. The commission recalls, I think, that at the last meeting, you voted to issue an enforcement order. At the time, we thought it was one home doing work within or near the resource areas at least. And shortly after the meeting, I went out and met with the homeowners there and discovered it was 2 properties. It was more or less kind of a joint project. And they've been very cooperative. I spent time out there going over everything. I did check the wetlands, so I'm comfortable with what's shown on the plan. And, this applicant and the one we'll be hearing from shortly has done everything they should be doing and what the commission's asked up through now. So with respect to this particular one at 64, where that tree is proposed let me just see if I can look at that again. So yeah, by wetland flag F68, it was pretty close to the limit there when I walked it. So I do appreciate that they're proposing to kind of pull back from the disturbance a little bit there and try to reestablish that little corner. But the rest of it, it's not in the riverfront. You know, they are trying to leave at least 15 feet there now. And the proposal to convert to lawn in the area, I don't particularly have any problems with that. Bob brought up a good point with respect to the barrier. I think Mr. Tatro and I talked briefly about the idea of possibly doing boulders. It wasn't something I was particularly too concerned with here. If the commission wanted a barrier of some sort, for instance, I'm not sure that the size and the spacing would necessarily work. And there's also other alternatives to that, you know, maybe add some vegetation or a split rail fence or in lieu of or in addition to or things of that nature. I wasn't too particularly fond of the idea of the boulders there, but it's certainly an option too.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep, go ahead, Bob.
Following up, I don't know, James, maybe you can weigh in, see if there seems to be a, 8-foot separation between them is virtually no barrier at all. So, I don't know if you could weigh in with it. How would a split rail fence or something of that nature work for you?
Well, Bob, I put that forth to the applicants as an option, and they really didn't like the idea of the split rail fence.
Okay.
That was the first option I suggested, and for whatever reason, that's visually, I guess they didn't like that, and so we're looking at boulder as another. Again, I no matter what we do here, even if we're split rail fence or boulder or vegetation, I think the primary value is just the visual delimitation, rather than its ability to stop incursion or travel. And I think the boulders will do that adequately.
All right, we'll discuss it further. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any questions or comments from the public on this particular hearing? Okay, hearing none, does the commission feel comfortable closing this tonight? Give me a nod of the head or something I can.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, James, we'll close this hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Martha, you want to go to the next one?
You got it. Notice is hereby given in accordance with the provisions of General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, that Arkady and Irina Furman, 68 Cherry Street, Shrewsbury, have filed a notice of intent for the alteration and restoration of riverfront areas at 68 Cherry Street. A public hearing will be held on the above notice at 7 p.m. on Tuesday evening, June 23rd, 2020.
Do we have a presenter tonight for this hearing?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it's again me, James Tatro.
Okay, James.
So, Mr. Chairman, number 68 Cherry Street is the focus of this notice of intent. It's the abutting property, and no matter what Mr. Mr. Stone says, that the applicants have been good actors in response to the problem being pointed out to them. I must extend to you their apologies for not understanding the rules and for having taken action and cleared land within, in this case, the riverfront area without being aware of the rules and having done so mistakenly. So I have to apologize on their behalf. In this case, the applicants are Katie and Irina Furman. They altered about a total of 11,000 square feet of area on the back and side yards of their home. They didn't come as close to the wetland as the Sebastians on the abutting property. The closest approach is probably near flag F64, about 25 feet away. And when they were apprised by Mr. Stone of what they had done and how they had to stop and take remedial action, put up a barrier, they did so right away. And I started discussions with the Furmans about what was involved here, because they had altered riverfront area, and it's not as simple a case as with the simple buffer zone that their neighbors had altered. And what we looked at was how much riverfront area there is on the property. There's about 20,900 square feet. It's just, you see on that plan on the screen, you see two red lines. The red line closer to the bottom of the screen is the limit of the inner riparian zone. The red line that sort of bisects the property running from the back, if you're standing in the road, the back right corner to the front left almost, that red line is the limit of the outer riparian zone, the limit of the riverfront area. And what you see, to keep with pointing out colors, you see a hatched green area behind the house. Of what they have altered, they are asking to, yep, as the cursor is circling, they want to have that remain, that be added to their yard. As with on the abutting property, you see the well shown directly behind the house, and you see it's unfortunately a little hard to see on this plan. A gray line, that was the limit of their yard previously. As I said in response to Ken's question, we and the applicant, when this house was first constructed, very consciously made a decision to stop the yard before getting in the riverfront area. Unfortunately, the Furmans were told that they could go much further, and they did so, but did not alter any wetland area, but they got into the buffer zone and they got into the riverfront area. What we are proposing here is to, you see the at the limit of what's been altered, you see a proposed erosion control barrier, which is actually in place. What we're proposing to do is do plantings according to one of the data transects from back and that wetland delineation of 2014. Luckily for us, when that wetland was delimited over at flag F68 just behind the abutting property, was one of the points where the wetland scientist noted the species that he saw on both the upland and wetland sides. And so what we're proposing to plant in the area that will be restored to riverfront area are some of those plants which were noted by the wetland scientist on the upland side at flag F68, which included jack-in-the-pulpit, goldenrod, dogwood, and crabapple trees. And that is, in addition to some willows, which I think are appropriate in this case. We actually have a very high groundwater table. That is what the applicants, the Furmans, propose to help restore that area, and they're also proposing, as on the abutting property, to install a line of boulders as a barrier delimiting the yard. You can see, if you again look at that green hatched area, you see a line of boulders on sort of a triangle, line of boulders shown on the two sides of it, in effect marking off the limit of the yard for the future. I would note that as work in the riverfront area, even that they are proposing to go back to a total alteration of just under 10% of the riverfront area. And we looked at an alternatives analysis, looked at the other properties for sale in Shrewsbury, and looked at do they also entail possible wetland area impacts and the economics thereof. And I would note that the depth of backyard that the Furmans are proposing off their house at, depending on exactly where you measure it, some 75 to 80 feet. It's not unusual for this area. They're not proposing anything that's out of scale with abutting properties. and I think it's a reasonable step back. And again, I would harken back to what Brad said, that both of these parties have been very responsible in actions after being told of their mistake.
All right, are you all set for questions, James?
I'll try.
Martha?
Okay. I think this is a case where a new house goes in. We have the wetlands line figured out. We have the lawn figured out. And then down the road, the backyard gets increased. And that is it's a systemic problem that we have in town. I'm sorry that we have to deal with it tonight. And I'm stating my views. As far as I looked over the records. Thank you, James. They were quite complete. As far as the vegetation goes, there was also a lot of maple that was listed in that original data analysis, and I know that we're not planting maple for the Asian longhorn beetle.
Right.
So I would like to propose some black gum, some tupelo, which will also do well in moist soils. And I would also like to point out that goldenrod is not considered a shrub because it's not woody. And so I would propose goldenrod should do fine in there, but I would also like to propose perhaps some sweet pepper bush and or spice bush. And that'll do me. Thank you.
Jason?
Yeah, I feel bad for these homeowners, and I do commend them for working tirelessly with Brad. I'm not 100% comfortable with leaving the proposed lawn within the riparian zone, or the outer riparian zone. I know they're caught up into, they were told something, they did it, I hear that argument, but they still did it, right? I would like to see that. I don't feel as though it should be lawn. I think it should go back the best it can to what it was before. But that's my only comment.
Jason, so what you're saying is to limit the lawn to the buffer zone area only?
Yeah, I mean, I think the boulders should follow that outer riparian zone. Otherwise, I mean, there's no, and James, you had suggested this in just the last hearing, right? This is a visual effect. There is no true physical measures to restrain an individual or family or a new buyer down the road to step into this area and do whatever they want to it, correct? I mean, that's what you said. And here we are suggesting, okay, well, let's carve out this piece of lawn, which is clearly in the outer riparian zone. What's to say somebody doesn't come down the road, a new buyer in 10 years, and carve up this lawn?
Well,
we're back in the same position. So
I just want to touch on a couple of points, and which I didn't emphasize in the presentation, is that not that untouched land which is not wooded does not have great value, but I just wanted to point out that the area that was altered was not trees. They didn't cut down woods to create that. It was, you can actually see the again, the scallop line further back on the property, which was the actual tree line. I just want to make sure there's not a misconception in that regard. But in a bigger picture, the Furmans, had they known of the rules, could have proposed this 2,080 square foot addition to their yard within the rules.
So
I'm not,
James, just to respond to that, so I'm looking at the photo from the GIS that was submitted with the application.
Yep.
And it's pretty clear that although it may not be trees, there was clearly vegetation there.
oh yeah, oh I
Right? I mean, there's
Jason,
clearly.
I don't doubt that.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not contesting.
it follows your scalp line. You know, I'm not disagreeing with the plan, like, but there is clearly thick vegetation that was there. So that's number one. Number two is, I really don't want to be hard on this, but hey, I did something that somebody else told me is not a really good excuse or a really good argument to say, well, I did it because somebody told me to. I know I didn't know the rules, but I did it anyway.
If I may,
that's not really good.
We're not
really
arguing. If I may, we're not arguing that they should be allowed to keep 2,084 square feet of the alteration as their yard because the previous alteration was a mistake. That's not our position. Our position is that under the normal standard of the rules, with being allowed to alter 10% of your riverfront area, that is what they would be allowed. They're proposing to revegetate the other portion, all the rest, which is some 9,000 square feet and change of what was altered, to restore it. They're not in any way trying to leverage having made a mistake into getting anything that they wouldn't have been normally allowed to request under the rules.
But again, and this is where I'm going to stop because I'm not going to argue the point. Because they made a mistake, you're looking to reward them.
Okay, Jason, are you all done?
I'm all set.
Bob?
Yeah, I'd have the same reservations in terms of the barriers here. And we might discuss that later, either bigger stones or certainly closer together. But, and maybe even offer you an option of having the stones or reconsidering a post fence or different vegetation. With respect to the Rivers Act and the 10%, I don't want to disagree with Jason, but they are, if this were a petition to come and alter this and gain 10%, it's acceptable. So, admittedly, they did go ahead and do this, but they are presumably restoring what they did in excess of the regulations. So I'm done too.
Okay, Ken?
I kind of agree with Jason. I think, I think what was done should, kind of be put back to where it was before. It's just my thought.
Okay. Brad, do you have anything more to add?
Yes. So I've actually heard a lot of good things from the commissioners. I'm just trying to figure out where to start. First of all, listening to what was in that riverfront area, while I do agree it wasn't necessarily heavy wooded, it certainly did have value. So I would defer to Martha's comments in terms of what she feels would be appropriate, and she gave suggestions in terms of trying to reestablish, something that's indigenous to that area and it's going to be beneficial. In addition to that, Jason's comments regarding, possible future expansion and, being concerned about the riverfront alteration in general too. For this particular one, in thinking about Bob's comment as well, if there was a better barrier in place than what's being proposed, I'd feel more comfortable with the proposal in terms of what would be lawn. That's just my opinion. But to further touch on the regulations, I mean, the riverfront disturbance, and this argument kind of goes back to, you may recall many years ago, people came into the commission thinking by right they could disturb up to 5,000 square feet of wetlands. Well, that's not true when you read the regulations. That's discretionary. The commission can allow up to that. This is a post-Rivers bill subdivided lot, so certainly the up to 10% is discretionary as well. So even if it had been proposed when the house was built, it wasn't something by right they could do. It's discretionary up to that amount. So the commission isn't necessarily forced to allow in 10% of disturbance for this lot if you don't choose to. But from what I can see, I'm not necessarily dissuaded from the lawn, but if the lawn's going to be there where it's proposed, I'd like to see a little bit of better protection and to make sure what's beyond it gets restored adequately.
Okay, thanks, Brad. Does anyone from the public have any questions or comments on this hearing? All right, I don't hear any. Excuse me, my voice is going. Not hearing any. We'll close the hearing. Is the commission happy with closing it tonight? And then we can vote and impose conditions, or would you rather see James think about this for another month and possibly come back with an alternate plan? What's the commission's desire?
Well, it's really up to James, isn't it? He's kind of heard everyone's position, so it's really up to James whether he wants to close it or try to come back to satisfy some of the concerns that have been addressed.
Well, if the uncertainty is partly in regard to proposing some additional plantings, such as Martha suggests, and a change of the barrier, or perhaps a change of size or space of the barrier, I would certainly wish to have the hearing closed.
James, I'll weigh in here with my way I feel on this one. Hearing what Brad had to say tonight about the 10% not being, the right of the homeowner. And we have a split commission, it looks like right now, regarding that lawn area. It looks like it's a 50-50 gamble. And I'll just throw something out there. Would you be willing to compromise on the lawn area and pull it back instead of taking the 10% to pull it back, say 5% to a 5% taking of riverfront, and then again reestablishing that remaining 5% with natural vegetation that Martha recommended? So in other words, it would be a shift of the lawn line.
Yep.
And I'm not certain how the commission feels about it. Some people may want the line to stay as totally out of riverfront, but I throw that out there. If any of the commissioners want to weigh in on that, feel free to do so right now. If that's something, would that be something, Jason, you would be willing to entertain? Or
I don't know.
okay,
To be quite honest with you, Mr. Chairman, as Brad has pointed out, 10% is completely discretionary.
correct.
Conditions. So even if, and again, it's not this specific homeowner. It's just, as Martha also pointed out, this is kind of a rampant problem we run into.
Right.
If they had done this correctly and
Yeah.
petitioned us, would we have voted to allow 10%? I don't know the answer to that. So I don't
Right.
know if they asked for 5%, if we would have done it. I really think, I would like to see it put back the way it was, but, I'm one voice. I think that, that's just the way I feel.
Yeah.
I feel bad they're caught up in this situation, but.
Yeah, Ken was also on the same boat as you, Jason, in this. Ken, what's your feelings on?
I'm saying some sort of a compromise, I think would be okay.
Okay. And going back to Martha, you're okay with a compromise if they were to give us?
I would certainly entertain a compromise. And I did want to echo Brad's comment to James that different habitats, whether or not they are treed, have ecological value to the wildlife, and that sort of scrub vegetation is very important to a whole suite of wildlife species. So I just want to get that out into the record.
Okay, no, that's good. And Bob, I know you were talking about the barrier, the stone. Well, the stone, whether we have a split rail fence and arborvitae behind it, or whether we have stones, they're truly not barriers. If somebody wanted to bypass them and dump their leaf clippings into the wetland, there's nothing those type of barriers are going to do. But would you be willing to, I mean, I agree with you. I think the 2-foot stones are a little on the small side, but to go with a little bigger stone and even mix it up with some vegetation between them, like if Martha's recommendation for those species for, replanting in the disturbed areas are sandwiched behind them and between them, would that be?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of potential options.
Yeah.
But having a 6-foot separation between each 2-foot stone, it seems to be not much of a delineation.
No, I think what James was saying was that's more of a physical line that future homeowners
Right.
will be able to say, geez, what's this line of rocks there for? And they'll say, oh, you can't go beyond it. That's basically what they serve. But I'm thinking of an enhanced barrier, bigger rocks, and more of Martha's plantings. The density is what I'm getting at, getting a higher
Sure.
density of those kind of shrubs in there and to bring back more wildlife habitat. James,
Sure, I think it should
now you've
apply to
heard
both
a
of
little
these.
more. What are you thinking?
I think those types of things should apply to both of these lots. And whatever we do for the barrier on one, we should do on the other.
Correct. You're right, Bob. Yeah, you're right.
Mr. Chairman, I think we would be amenable to some sort of a compromise. I hope that this applicant isn't being made to pay for the sins of other folks who've been before the commission. I hope that's not the spirit in which this is going, but we'd certainly be amenable to a compromise and to a greater density of stone barriers.
Yeah, I mean, we're not asking for anything more than we've done on all other barrier situations, James. So this applicant's not being singled out any differently than we do for all our reviews.
John,
Okay.
can I make a comment?
Sure, go ahead.
So, I've heard a lot of different concerns from the commission, and I'm not sure ultimately, how everything would work out with a vote at the moment as well. My one comment, and I want to emphasize that, from our end, anytime that the commission's tried to condition plan changes, for instance, and during the hearing process and close something and get that information later on, it's been very challenging for us to actually get that. And we spend a lot of time and effort chasing people down for these things. And we have something later on tonight on an enforcement item with, same conditions, add these things to the plan that we never got in advance of the construction. So, earlier tonight, I was okay with the construction sequencing, for instance, because the plan itself isn't changing at all. How they want to tackle it is a different story. But if there's something outside of a very minor change, like if we're not talking about just, increase in the size of boulders, for instance, if there's a lot of things like the vegetation, a different barrier, a certain percentage of lawn, things like this, I'd rather not see it designed by words with the commission. I actually want to see that on a plan and something you could vote on before you think about closing it and taking a vote. That's just my thoughts there.
Yep. I agree with you, Brad. That's where I was leaning to. Now that we've thrown that out, James would take that back and come back at us next month with a revised plan, incorporating the comments. Or present the same plan and let us do a vote on it. It's up to James. All right, James, what are you thinking tonight? Continuation or close it?
I will ask for a continuation then, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right, we will continue this hearing until our next meeting, which is July 21st, 2020. Thanks, James.
Thank you.
Okay, Martha.
Okay. Notice is hereby given in accordance with the provisions of General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, that Feng Yuan, 4 Beths Road, Shrewsbury, has filed a request for determination of applicability for the construction of a deck at 4 Beths Road. A public meeting will be held on the above request at 7 p.m. on Tuesday evening, June 20, 2020.
Yes. Frank, I think I see you. Are you presenting tonight, or who's presenting for you?
I don't know. I submitted, the paperwork, everything. It's pretty straightforward because it is a toll brother's house. When we bought a house, they have an option to build a porch. They're willing to put a post on it. We didn't do it. But right now, we just think we put a porch on, deck on it. That's it. It doesn't affect anybody. All my neighbors, everybody has a deck. We just don't have.
Okay. Brad, can you show us where the wetland line is here, where they're up? I see the deck, but where is the? That's it right there. Okay. All right. In this deck, is it going to be just on concrete piers? Frank?
It's gonna be I didn't get it. Don't get your question.
I mean, is it a wooden deck that's supported on pillars, like concrete pillars going into the ground?
Yeah. Yes, it's gonna supported by 1 feet diameter concrete post, the 6x6 post.
Okay.
That's from the deck designer of Lowe's. Everything based on their requirement.
Okay. All right. Let's go for questions. Martha?
I'm all set.
Jason?
I'm all set.
Bob?
All set.
Ken?
All set.
Brad?
I'm all set.
Is there anyone from the public who has any questions or comments on this request?
Mr. Chairman? This is Bob, and I would move that we issue a negative determination with regards to this request.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? And we'll go roll call. Martha?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
And John Ostrowski, aye. Okay, Frank, you're all set. You got a negative determination, which is good.
Thank you very much.
You do not have to file for the notice of intent. You are done with conservation.
So my next step is have to work with Brad, right?
Yeah, Brad will get you paperwork that shows that you applied. It's a negative determination of applicability. So yeah, that'll just show you're good to go.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep, work
So
with Brad.
almost 2 months already. Yeah, I know the COVID. And just wait 2 months almost. Just wait this day. You can say okay. I got it. So
I know.
thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Martha.
What else?
Are we doing 371 Oak next?
Yes, 371 Oak.
Okay. Notice is hereby given in accordance with the provisions of General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, that Jason Fournier, 371 Oak Street, Shrewsbury, has filed a request for determination of applicability for the removal of trees at 371 Oak Street. A public meeting will be held on the above notice at 7 p.m. on Tuesday evening, June 23rd, 2020.
All right, do we have a presenter here tonight for that? Is there a presenter for 371 Oak Street?
Yes, sir. This is Jason Fournier. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Jason. Why don't you give us a description? And Brad, can you put up some of the pictures? I think you have some photos of this. We'll wait till the photos come up, Jason.
Okay. Great.
All right.
So
Why don't you give us a description, Jason, what's going on?
Sure thing. My property is located at 371 Oak Street. The east side of my property directly abuts some wetlands, and there is a series of pine trees on the east side of the property, one of which is completely dead, tree number 4 in the image, and trees 1, 2, and 3 are on their way out. I had an arborist, a couple arborists, one from Templeman Tree out of Westboro and one from American Climbers out of Hopkinton. Say they were pretty well ravaged from what they assume was caterpillars a few years ago. My concern is with the safety of my family members and just my property. Tree 4 specifically has some really large overhanging limbs in my children's swing set. And my concern again is just with the well-being of my family and any potential storms knocking down the dead trees and doing some damage to people or property. And then there is a grove of really tall 100-foot plus pine trees on the south side of my property. 2 in particular that I am concerned with. One which has a noticeable lean towards my home, and one that there it is in the image. Tree number 1 is the one that has the lean towards my home. They're about 50 to 60 feet from the structure, and then tree 2, which is on the westmost side of my property, pretty much right on the west border, recently cracked during a microburst and luckily fell in between the rest of the grove. And there's another section of that tree that has an old lightning strike crack in it. So that tree is troubling. I just don't want it to hurt me or my family. And then there's a family who lives behind me with some young children too, which, if the tree was to fall, it could potentially fall in their property as well.
Okay, so we are looking at a total of how many is that? 6 and another 2, 8 trees total, Jason? Is that correct?
Yeah, total. There are 8 total that I'm concerned about. I don't, I would say on the southwest side, trees 1 and 2 are a big concern, and then on the east side, I would say tree 4 and 1, 2, and 3 are my biggest concern. 5 and 6, I think, are healthy and there's no big risk there, but
okay,
I think down the line there might be. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go to questions right now. Okay, Jason. Martha?
Sure.
Jason, what kind of trees are 5 and 6?
I believe that 5 is a pine tree and 6 maybe an oak tree.
Okay. And what's the what's the concern with 6?
Just the height of it and its health and the proximity to my home. If it was to come down, if it's not healthy and could be easily blown over with strong winds, I wouldn't want it to hit my home or damage property.
Has that one been evaluated by an arborist?
As I said, I had an arborist come out. He didn't comment specifically on that tree, so I couldn't answer that question confidently.
Okay. I know that the oaks were also hit. If you had caterpillar damage from the pines, likely that the oak was hit too. It's a lot of trees to take down in one spot at the edge of a wetland. Would you? Sometimes when we talk about taking trees down, we don't necessarily take them all the way down to the bottom, but you can leave some trunk standing, which has wildlife value and will draw in woodpeckers that your kids can have fun watching, etc. And
Yeah.
it isn't necessarily tall, so tall that it presents a safety risk. And then the other question is, would you consider, it looks like there might be smaller trees that could grow up and eventually replace those, or would you consider adding some saplings or some younger trees in there once the trees are?
There are some smaller trees in there that would grow. If it's a requirement from the commission to plant something to replace the trees, I would definitely consider that. Again, my goal isn't to destroy the wetlands or just get rid of the trees for aesthetic. I do like the trees and what it brings to the wildlife. So if it was a requirement to replace them, I'd be more than happy to look into that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jason Port.
Sure. So, Jason, the trees that you do take down, are you leaving stumps in place? Are you grinding? Do you have any idea what's happening there?
Yeah, that's a good question. Something I haven't really thought too much about. It's obviously with this number of trees, it's as much a financial decision too as anything else. So
right.
Yeah. I haven't really thought about that, to be honest.
All right.
Yeah.
So that's really my only question. I'm all set.
Okay.
Bob.
Oh, no questions.
Ken.
Kind of agree with Martha's recommendations.
Okay. Jason, I have a question regarding the back trees, the 6 of them back there. How far are they from your house, actually? I take it this is you looking out your back yard toward the rear of the property. How far is the house from that tree line?
I would say the tree number 6 is closest to the driveway, and that would probably be, I would say maybe 40, at the most 50 feet from the corner of my home. And then as you go into the yard, tree number 1 is pretty far from the home itself, maybe closer to 100 feet, 80 to 100, I would assume. Yeah. But like I said, the ones 1, 2, 3, and 4, the farther you go into the yard, those ones seem less healthy.
1, 2, 3, and 4 are the worst of the 6 on that rear property line. Is correct?
Yeah.
5 and 6, as you said, were not quite decayed as the first 4 were, or compromised, I should say. And then the other 2 on the other side of the home, I did see those. They look pretty evident that they're problem trees. Would there be a way that you would leave 5 and 6 possibly up? Like if you remove all 6, you really have no mature big trees back there.
Right.
Is 5 and 6 an issue right at the moment? I mean, they do look from the pictures, they look rather healthy, but.
Sure. Yeah, I wouldn't say they're a problem. I mean, I would be fine. With those trees, the limbs are kind of concerning. So I would be.
Yep.
It would ease my concern if maybe they were just pruned. Some of the big limbs were cut off.
Okay.
The ones overhanging the swing set. But yeah, I don't have if those were to stay and not be cut down, I would be fine with that.
All right. And then on the trees 1 through 4, maybe Martha, would you say taking 2 of those and leaving a 10-foot? It's not a stump, but how much do they cut them back?
Snag. Oh, they won't come back. That for pines, you cut them off and they're done.
Oh no, they're not going to come back. But this is for the wildlife habitat. You were saying rather than take them down to stump level, leave a portion of the tree. How high is that portion that you would like to see left?
How far away? What's the distance between those trees and your playset, Jason?
Oh, they're probably 10 to 15 feet.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would say I'm gonna guess 8 to 10 feet is probably good.
Would you be recommending that for all four, Martha? Trees 1 through 4, or would you just?
If Jason were amenable to it aesthetically, yes. Otherwise, I would ask for one of them at least to be left that way.
Yeah.
And if may I ask if I wanted to take them down completely, would it be a requirement to replant in their place?
Not if there are younger trees waiting to take their place. And if you were to leave the stumps in, because we're trying to look at soil stability and retention, among other things.
Right.
So no, I would not require it, provided that there were living saplings behind them, which I think I'm seeing in the photos.
Yeah, there's actually an apple tree back there, which is random, but kind of cool.
Do you get good apples?
We do. Both. I have an apple tree in my front yard, which gets apples, and then the one that's on the east side of my property grows apples as well. Yeah.
That's fun.
All right, so we got a couple options here. Hopefully, Jason, someone would make a motion for a negative at some point determination here, but we have to know what we are actually going to
Mr. Chairman, do we have any public comment?
Let's see. Does anyone from the public have any questions or comments on this hearing? But before you you can make a motion, Bob, and then we'll
make
have
a
a
motion.
discussion.
Yep.
Go
I
ahead,
would make
Brad.
a motion that we issue a negative determination with respect to this proposal, subject to certain conditions, which I will ask Martha to enumerate.
Okay, but hold on. Brad wanted to say something before we.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Brad, go ahead.
Sure. No, I just wanted to chime in. I didn't go view the lot for this particular application, but I am familiar with it. I believe it may have been the applicant that reached out to the town a while back when there was a beaver impoundment back there. So we did some beaver management in the area. Might have been a couple years ago, or maybe about a year and a half ago. It was ultimately affecting somebody's basement down the road, but this was one of the lots I think that had concerns at the time as well. So I know what the area looks like. It's hard to tell from the pictures, but those trees aren't on the edge of a wetland that's there. If that's going to help the commission at all, it's probably, from what I remember, about a 5 to 6 foot drop down to the actual wetlands from there, and the wetlands are probably roughly 40 feet from those trees. So just if that helps you visualize what's there.
Okay.
So it's not flat. You're not looking at the wetlands right on the edge of that tree line, and there is quite a bit of grade in there that's down to that area as well.
Okay. All right, Bob, you made a motion, right?
Yes, I made a motion, subject to conditions that I'm going to ask Martha to enumerate.
Okay, and do we have a second for the motion?
Second.
All right, let's go into discussion.
Okay. I would prefer that if it's possible, I would prefer that trees 5 and 6 be retained.
Okay.
Seeing as that how they seem to be healthy, and only pose a threat as if the lower limbs were to drop. I would also like to condition it that the stumps be retained and not ground. And if it so pleases you to leave a taller one as a pole snag, I don't think we need to require that, but that would be a suggestion from an ecologist and a parent.
Okay.
Martha, would that be just one tree, leave a 10-foot section?
Yes.
Of those 4?
Yes.
Just so one. All right. And Any other discussion on this? All right, so we have a motion, a second. Let's do a roll call with the conditions that Martha has imposed. Martha?
Aye.
Jason?
Oh, am I on mute? Aye.
Bob?
Hi.
Ken?
Aye.
And John Ostrowski, aye. All right, Jason, you've got a negative determination with some conditions.
Great. Can I ask, does that also include the two tall pine trees on the south side of the property?
Correct. Right, Bob? Your motion included that, correct?
Yeah, we included all of the trees that he had enumerated,
Okay.
except that Martha excised 5 and 6, right?
Right.
So all as noted, except for 5 and 6.
Okay,
Great.
Jason?
I thank you. I thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Good night.
Good night.
Okay, Martha, 17 Rockwell.
Notice is hereby given in accordance with the provisions of General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, that Jeffrey Lenty, 17 Rockwell Drive, Shrewsbury, has filed a request for determination of applicability for the construction of a shed at 17 Rockwell Drive. A public meeting will be held on the above request at 7 p.m. on Tuesday evening, June 23rd, 2020.
All right, do we have a presenter for this hearing?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Jeff Lenty is on the phone.
Okay, do you want to give us a little bit of a description of your property and what you're planning to do?
Because I am on the phone, I cannot see what you are seeing. And
Okay.
I did submit a picture to Brad. And if he has that up, I can.
Yep, he did. He's just got it up here right now. So we see a rather pretty good sized swimming pool, and it looks like
Yes.
a shed that's highlighted behind it.
Correct. So there was a smaller shed there that was rotting and was becoming unsafe that I have taken down. The yellow outline has been leveled with crushed rock, and my hope is to put a larger shed, which would be the blue outline in that area.
What's the size of it?
14 by 20.
14 by 20. All right. So is the gravel down already?
It is.
Yeah, so you've taken the old one down and the gravel is in. Okay. Let's see. How close are you to the wetlands there? Is there?
I don't know the exact distance. My estimation is more than 60 feet.
All right. Yeah, Brad is sort of trying to indicate on the picture where it is. All right, let's go for questions. Martha?
I don't have any questions.
Jason?
I'm all set.
Bob?
No questions at this time.
Ken?
All set.
Brad?
I'm all set.
Does anyone from the public have any questions or comments on this hearing? All right, don't hear any. Bob, would you like to make the motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we issue a negative determination with respect to this proposal.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, let's do a roll call. Martha?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
John Ostrowski, aye. All right, you're all set.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Martha, 64 Holden.
Notice is hereby given in accordance with the provisions of General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, that Matthew Scarbo, 11 Trowbridge Circle, Shrewsbury, has filed a request for determination of applicability for the replacement of a pedestrian bridge at 64 Holden Street. A public will be held on the above request at 7 p.m. on Thursday evening, June 23rd, 2020.
Matthew, I think I see you there.
Hey,
All right, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you plan on doing?
just to be clear, everyone can hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
Sounds good. So, I'm a Boy Scout with Troop 114, Shrewsbury, Mass. As part of my Eagle Scout project, I'm going to be replacing a bridge north of the Shrewsbury High School. It's about a 20-foot bridge. I'm replacing it with similar dimensions. It'll have a ramp on both sides. The stream is about 20 feet wide, 1 foot deep. The school has approved it, and so has my Boy Scouts Council. I submitted some sketches to Brad of the dimensions and the location of the bridge. I can pull them up if he doesn't have anything. Okay.
Yeah, Brad's put it on. Okay.
I have a better map if I can present and show that to you if you want. It doesn't make a difference.
Okay, why don't you try it, Matthew?
Okay, are you seeing this map?
No.
How about now?
It's coming up right now. Yep, it's up.
Okay, so this is a GIS map of the trails. I mapped it out last week, and the bridge is located exactly up here.
Okay.
And the stream follows down this area.
How big was that stream, Matthew? Did you say it was 20 foot wide, was it? Did you say?
16, 20, around there.
16 feet roughly, and your bridge is 20 foot. Your proposed bridge is about 20 feet long.
24 to be exact. So it's a 20-foot beam with an angle cut on one side for a ramp on that end, and then a ramp on the other end with some planks laid down.
Okay. And what are you replacing? I mean, there is a bridge there now.
There is a bridge there, and it's not so safe anymore. It's slippery and kind of falling apart a little bit. On one side, the ramp is pretty much dilapidated, and it can just use a replacement.
Okay. And are you replacing it with the same type of construction, or are you doing something different?
Structurally, the bridge is different. Now, I can show you sketches of the bridge if you like.
Oh yeah, Brad's got a photo up here right now of it. Geez, it's not much of a bridge. Yeah.
What do you mean?
It looks like it. Is that just a planked bridge about 6 inches or a foot off the ground?
Yeah, there's really not a lot to it.
Yeah.
It's that 120-foot beam cut at the angle, like I said, planks laid over the cross, and then a ramp on the other side.
Yeah. Okay.
There's pier blocks supporting it on four corners.
New ones or using the ones that are out there now?
I'll be using new ones.
All right. You ready for some questions?
Yes.
Okay, Martha.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time getting particular words. What are you using for supports for it, Matthew?
Concrete piers.
Concrete piers, okay. And what's it on currently?
Concrete piers.
Concrete piers, okay. What are you gonna do with the old ones?
The old concrete piers?
Yeah.
To be honest, I'm not quite sure. My Scoutmaster, Rick Spur, has been involved in a lot of projects like this, even ones specific I was taking out on other bridges, and he told me that he told me confidently that he'll help me handle the disposal of all those materials.
Okay, so I guess my more pointed question is, are you removing the old ones and
Yes.
Okay, all right, perfect. That's all I have, thank you.
Jason.
No question. I think it's a great project, and thank you for attempting to do it.
Thank you.
Bob. Bob?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah, I have no questions. Congratulations. I hope it's a successful project.
Thank you.
Ken?
No questions, and good luck, young man.
Thank you, sir.
Brad?
And
Anything?
I'm all set.
All right, let's see if we have any questions or comments from the public.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we issue a negative determination with respect to this petition.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Let's do a roll call. Martha?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
John Ostrowski, aye. You're all set, Matthew.
Thank you. And just to be clear, that means I'm done with the Conservation Commission and I'm good to remove the bridge.
You're
Yeah.
good. You're good to go. The negative is a good thing here. A negative
Okay.
determination is a good thing.
Thanks. I
Okay,
see
it
later
mean-
on the
all it
agenda
means-
there's a,
Yeah, all it means is you don't have to go for a full-blown filing for a notice of intent. So you basically, the negative means you don't have to go for that. You're good to go with what you've submitted.
okay. I see
Okay.
later on the agenda there's a declarations of applicability for 64 Holden Street. Is that part of what we just did? Or is that another?
What's that? You're fading out. I didn't catch that, Matthew.
In number 4 of the agenda, new and old business, there's a 64 Holden
Yep.
Street. Declarations
Oh,
of
that's
applicability.
that's where we officially actually give the authorization to do the work. This, under new and old business, discuss and sign orders of conditions and determinations of applicability. Because it's a remote meeting, we can't sign your paperwork tonight.
Okay.
So we will be meeting Brad at the town hall at some point this week and signing the paperwork. Okay?
Okay, so there's nothing for me to stick around for.
Nothing more for you to stick around for.
Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Okay, you're welcome.
Have a good night.
Yep, good night. All right, Martha, 9:35.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I am not finding that notice. Would that have been separate, Brad?
Did you pull that one down, Brad?
It should have been in the in that package I sent, but I can just.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, this is John Grenier.
Yes, John.
I had actually sent an email to Brad. I'm not sure if he received it. That the request for modification for 935 Main Street we're withdrawing that request.
Correct. We were just going to read the notice, John.
Okay.
And
Sure.
then announce that it's been withdrawn in case somebody is tuning in for that.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Yep, that's it.
Oh, I found it. Okay, we're here. The tricky part is that the legal notices are not in the same order as the agenda items. So here we
Okay.
go. Notice is hereby given in accordance with the provisions of General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, that Wyman Farms LLC, 1 Golden Court, Westboro, Mass. 01581, has filed a request for an amended order of conditions to construct a retaining wall adjacent to building unit number 12 at 935 Main Street. A public hearing will be held on the above request at 7 p.m. on Tuesday evening, June 23rd, 2020.
All right, John Grenier, do you want to just officially withdraw it for the public?
Yes, please, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of Wyman Farms LLC, I would officially like to request to withdraw the request for amendment to the order of conditions for 935 Main Street.
Okay, so noted. And John, just to, I know you were trying to build this wall to lessen the slope. And now apparently the contractor has said he can build it per the original design drawing.
Yes, and it would have additionally given a little bit more room for walking around to the backyard.
Yep.
But they graded it out and they've determined it's fine. They've actually already graded the slope out, and they jute netted it and hydroseeded it. So
Okay.
and it actually looks pretty good.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes our meetings and hearings. We're on to our new and old business. And we're going to discuss and sign orders of conditions and determinations of applicability. Well, we won't be signing tonight, but we'll be discussing and voting on them. So, Bob, are there any we
Mr.
can?
Chairman,
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to issue an order of conditions to Little Creek Realty Trust for renovation to an existing daycare facility at 214 Grafton Street.
All right, do we have a second on that one?
Second.
Is there any discussion on that? I don't think we had any other conditions. I think they satisfied us. All right, let's do the roll call. Martha?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
John Ostrowski, aye. Okay, Bob.
Mr. Chairman, I further move that we issue an order of conditions to Bayview Drive Realty Trust for the demolition of existing residential dwelling and construction of two new single-family dwellings. And it's 5153 Bayview Drive. And there are some conditions there, but that Brad suggested, but you were breaking up, Brad, so I can't express them.
Okay, so that one specifically, they didn't do the sequence and narrative that the commission had asked for. They wanted to first retain the contractor and then have him come up with that. So I suggested during the hearing that that's fine with my department, but I would suggest that that narrative be written and in place and submitted to the commission prior to the issuance of any building permits for the project.
So moved.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on this one? All right, hearing none. Let's go for the roll call. Martha?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
John Ostrowski, aye.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we issue an order of conditions for to Chike Sebastian and Sonia Sebastian, that Kumsheri, to extend their backyard at 64 Cherry Street, subject to a modification of the delineation at the end of the work area, that they should include boulders, 2-foot boulders at a maximum 6 feet on center, or split rail fencing, or a vegetative screening based on a submittal to the Conservation Commission if they choose that option.
All right. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Martha, is that how you
I'm trying to give them options to either increase the density of those boulders or come up with some alternatives.
Okay, but not to do away with the boulders, Bob.
No. Well, if the alternatives would be, I wouldn't mind if they want to do away with the boulders and put up a fence with arborvitae, that'd be fine.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. I just think the fences.
If you want to express it in a different way, please do.
Yeah, no, my opinion is when we are offered the boulders, I always tend to take them over the split rail fence and the abrevieties. They're
Okay.
a more permanent delineation. After we're long gone, those boulders will still be sitting there. And I'm just concerned a little bit on the size. A 2-foot boulder isn't exactly a big guy. And Ken, what do you think, Ken, on the boulder size? Is it 2's adequate, or would you like a 3-foot would be a better?
I mean, 2 to 3 foot boulders are pretty good. I mean, they're readily available in certain areas.
Okay. So why don't we do a range and say a 2 to 3 foot boulder, like Ken said? I just don't want to see it going smaller than 2 on that size. But
So a minimum 2-foot boulder, but I want to bring them a little tighter, so I suggested 6 feet on center.
yeah, that's good. I agree with you.
So,
And include Martha's plantings. You were saying, Martha, a little bit of
That was for 68, Jerry.
Yeah, but they were going on this particular one too. They weren't we?
They had only proposed a single pine tree.
And you didn't.
For that.
I thought you had
a
said
discussion
something.
on adding.
Okay, you didn't have any because they were pretty close to the wetland at one corner there, weren't they? What was it, flag 68?
They were, but that they wanted to make that all lawn.
Okay.
So yeah, so I wasn't going to require any.
All right, so
I think no.
Okay. All right. I want to take a roll call on that one. Martha?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
John Ostrowski, aye. Okay, 68 we continued.
Mm-hmm.
We got 4 Beth's Road. We've already we voted on the negatives.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it, Bob. Okay. Certificates of compliance, Brad, why don't you go through those so we know what we will be signing?
Okay, so first one is 192 Main Street. I'm recommending that the commission issue that one. The next one is 196 Oak Street. I'm recommending that the commission does not issue that one at this time. And you may recall that's been in front of the commission a few times already. A law firm had requested it about 3 months ago as well. And specifically on those multi-unit buildings in the back, there is no roof leader system connected to any dry wells that may be in the ground. So there is some unfinished work there still. The ones on South Street, so there's 2 for 577 South Street. One was listed as lot 7. That one has been superseded by the one that simply says 577 South. And I did go out and take a look at that particular lot. Let me just pull up some photos for that one. Give me 1 second. Okay, so I'm bringing them up now. So what concerned me most about this lot was it's pretty much unstabilized still, and just beyond the driveway here, which I'll get to, there's a pretty good sized erosion rill that's there. Water comes off the driveway, and also there's water that comes from the area to the right of that retaining wall there. And ultimately it's causing quite a bit of erosion down in this area, and it's actually breached the erosion control that's in place now. There's quite a bit of sediment on the other side of that fence. You can see up in here, you know, even standing this far away, it looks like it's a pretty good active rill, and I think I might have a better shot of it too. Yeah, there it is there, and making its way down to the fence. Another shot of it. There you can see, towards the top of the picture is the down gradient side of the fence there. And then there's just quite a bit of, that's the septic system that's underneath that mound, I believe. So it just really needs the opportunity for vegetation to take place there. You know, typically for these certificates, we like to see that when it's long and being established, that it's grown in, you know, that it's established enough so you can at least mow it a couple of times. You know, when I was out there earlier, it certainly hadn't gotten to that point yet. And it's just some more pictures of the general area. But really, that's all it is at this point, is making sure that the area is permanently stabilized. That's what's going on with that particular one.
Okay.
And let me just check. So 19 Floral Street, we did get an application in. I did request more information, which I received. I started to go through the plans. There was some floodplain there. I'm not sure if everything's on the as-built it needs to be. And more importantly, I haven't had a chance to actually get out to that site and look at it. So I would ask that the commission hold off on that one for now. And then for Hickory Bend Road, that one's actually a partial, and I'm okay with the commission issuing that one.
Okay. So out of all of those, we only have two that we will be signing.
Mr. Chairman, can public?
Yes.
Can we make?
Yes. Identify yourself, please, for the record.
Mr. Chairman, this is Rashid Sheikh. I am the trustee of Seven Shadow Realty Trust, who built the 577 South Street. So basically, if I concur with Brad that they're probably, you know, those were the conditions. But right now, if you go out there and you see it's fully stabilized, all the green grass is coming out, and you know, honestly, the owners are also on the call, and they can, the potential owner, and we have been waiting for the commission to meet to close the house. So basically, they are living with their friends because they have no house. We were supposed to close on the 15th, but we extended the date because the commission had to move the meeting. So we would request that you ask the other people who are on the call and see that this basically has been totally stabilized. Now, there is no doubt that the water comes from the neighbors, and we actually put, you know, drain underneath, and that's where you see the gravel area at the end. So the Board of Health has gone there, the building inspector has gone there, and we have been issued the occupancy permit, and it's all totally green and stabilized. I mean, I wish if I would have known, I would have taken more pictures today. But I do know that the potential owners are on the call, and they can give you some witness.
Yeah. Do you have photos to show us right now?
Rohan, do you have some photos?
Let me check real quick. I think I might have something, but not of that specific area. But there is definitely more lawn in that area.
Yeah, what we saw, Rohan, was pretty marginal. I mean, it was barely any vegetation, and there were big erosion rills. Brad,
yes.
How old are those photos, Brad, that you put up?
Those photos were taken June 12th.
Yep.
So now it's June 23rd, it's almost 2 weeks.
Yep.
And we hydro-seeded it, and we addressed all those issues.
Yeah.
Actually, we have a second coat of a driveway there now too as well.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, as Brad just said, those photos we saw with almost no vegetation and the erosion rill,
But we,
that's June 12th, and you know we're June 23rd right now. We're 11 days from that. So what can be established that quickly to stabilize that site in 11 days?
Hydro Seed does real wonders nowadays.
Well, yeah, is it going to hold though? That's the question.
Yeah. Let me see. I think I do have some pictures too. So, actually, I have some old pictures.
I do have some pictures of the front where the lawn has grown and it's nice and green, but I don't have of that specific spot. If he has if Brad has a picture of the front, then we can try and compare. I guess I don't know.
Yeah, I think he does. He did show the front with the driveway. Why don't you show the front so we can see the comparison?
Okay. Camera change. Let me just try and figure out how to get a picture here. Just give me 1 second. Switch camera. Right there. This is, I think, probably last week. This was taken. This was taken actually 15th of June.
Brad, was that similar area to where you were taking your photo to, where your photos came from?
He did show the front picture as well, which was totally different.
Yeah, but the question, Rashid, I mean, the problem is we've got to do a site inspection here. I mean, we were out there 11 days ago and it was in poor shape. And whether things have changed, hopefully they've changed as much as you're saying they have. And, you know, we could then issue a certificate. But tonight, I don't think there's any way we could vote to issue this certificate. I wouldn't be in favor of it. I know that. Brad's pulling something up right now.
So the other important thing that I haven't mentioned yet is there's also an infiltration trench in that area where the active erosion is taking place. Now, there was some stone there. It looks like it's been covered up. I'm not sure if the trench was actually constructed or not, but I have some concerns that if it was constructed in that area, then it's being compromised at the moment as well. So it's not just stabilization that you need there. You also need to make sure that the trench is in place as was designed and that's properly functioning. And there's quite frankly a lot of water coming in that area. So it's something that does need to be fixed and it should be rechecked again.
I was only concerned about the family does not have a home, and if there is a condition you want to place or a bond, anything to help the family, but whatever the chair.
Yeah, it's beyond our scope, Rashid. We can't. I mean, we can't. You know, we can't issue a certificate of compliance until it's fully compliant. That's the nature of the beast. So, you know, we will do another inspection out there and. Hopefully things have been addressed. And but tonight, I would not be in favor of voting for that. And
fair enough.
I think I don't want to speak alone, so I'm just going to open it up to the commission right now. Are you in agreement, commission, that we would not issue a certificate tonight? Bob?
I agree.
Ken?
I agree.
Jason?
I agree.
Martha?
I also agree.
Okay. Well, that's it, Rashid and Rohan. Unfortunately, let's just make sure, Rashid, that when we go out there, that everything is okay. Brad's concerns have all been addressed, and hopefully we can issue one as soon as possible. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Rohan. Okay. We are done with certificates of compliance, discussing enforcement orders. I believe that's the next item. Brad, anything?
John?
Yes.
sorry to bother you, but when would the next inspection approximately take place? Do you guys have a deadline, like a time frame or something, or is it random, or how does that work?
We'll let Brad answer that.
Okay.
Well, the first thing that should really happen is that that infiltration trench should be constructed according to the plan. So make sure that that's in place. And with respect to stabilization, even the photo that I saw from the front that was taken more recently than my pictures, that looked like it also had areas that hadn't quite germinated fully yet. So I go back to my previous comment. It's for lawn to be established, I view it as you've got to be able to mow it a couple times. It already was hydroseeded when I was there, so I don't understand how something's happened between now and then where hydroseeding has made it better. The hydroseeding is good because it's tackifier and helping keeping things from erosion, and there's not more rills than what I saw. But really, until it's vegetated, there's risk of more problems there. So once it's grown, it's thick, it can be mowed a couple of times. That's when I want to take a look at it.
Okay. All right.
Okay, we got to move on to our enforcement orders. Brad, any updates?
So 59 Cherry Street, have not received anything on that one yet. I don't recall the exact deadline, but I believe it's first week of July. So there's still time to get something submitted to us within the timelines that the commission set. 64 and 68 Cherry Street, those were the two projects before us tonight. So the commission should be up to speed with that particular one. The other one is 6 Sherrill Drive. That's the one the commission voted on last month. Give me 1 second to see if I can pull up some information on that. Okay, so this was the original plan of record. So again, what the commission was supposed to get in the order of conditions as well was a revised plan that showed 3-foot boulders and a split rail fence, and I think vegetative barrier was part of it as well along the driveway's edge. And there was a specification for which wetland flags that would follow as well. We didn't get that prior to the construction. Now, since then, I've gotten quite a bit of correspondence from the applicant. He's also sent some photos. It appears that some of that constructed retaining wall that wasn't on the plan that was put in place has begun to be removed there. That was one that was submitted to us. And I'm not sure if this was something that was, this looks more like what was existing when I saw it. But that's, generally there was a rock retaining wall all along the edge of the driveway rather than the sloped area that was shown on the plan. I think that's it for photos. Let me go back to, we got an updated plan from the engineer that was dated, I believe, so June 16th. And I think we received it the 18th. And what it does is it now shows a little bit more what the commission was looking for in the condition, which is these boulders along the edge here, the fence, and some vegetation I believe I saw there too. So my understanding, at least from the correspondence we've gotten, is they've started to do some changes to more or less try to meet what was on the original plan. I haven't had a chance to go out and take a look at it yet. The other concern that I had was the replication area, which is in here. And when I had quickly looked at it, it didn't look like the replication area had been constructed. And we have a report from the applicant's wetland scientist that shows that it was constructed. And in his opinion, it meets the requirements for a wetland area. Why I didn't think it was ever done, and more or less because I was envisioning something different, because what they had specified on the plan in terms of the wetland replication area, and I've pulled it up. I'm not sure you can read it, but I can read it here. It's basically saying clusters of high bush blueberry, sweet pepper bush, common winterberry, northern arrowwood, and silky dogwood. I don't think that's what I saw in the wetland report. It was more grasses, sedges, that kind of thing. And I think it was mentioned that there was some red maples there that were pre-existing and kind of left in place. So I would have to look closer at that area too, just to confirm, number one, it was done and there's wetland veg there. But also I wanted to point out to the commission that it doesn't appear from the report anyway, that it was put in with the specifications on the original plan. Whether that concerns you or not, you want to see more of the swamp type woody material versus, like the more of the meadow mix that's there. That's something to think about as well.
All right. Rashid, this is your project, correct?
Yes, sir. I made you the report from Ecotech. So let me just give you a quick update. Yeah, Brad showed two pictures. One picture had shown with about 3 feet boulders. So what my excavation guy did after putting the sill fence, he thought that we want to give better protection, and we put line of boulders there because we had a lot of boulders, and we thought that we want to protect. We want to overprotect the area there, and basically the wetland was replicated back in 2018 when I started the construction, and I lost my buyer, so I sat on already replicated land for almost 2 years. So when I called Ecotech on June 5, he wrote in accordance with special condition 32, 33, and 34. I performed my evaluation on June 5th. The attached photo depicts the current condition of the replication area. The replication area is at least 80% covered with native wetland species, including an overstree of red maple that was preserved during excavation, along with spiku bush, shrubs, and a dense understory of sedges and rushes. Soil consists of an average of 12 inches of rich, water-saturated, stony topsoil over a depleted matrix subsoil. So in my opinion, this work has been done in accordance with these special conditions and the approved plan and protocol, and meets the general performance standard requirements for bordering vegetated wetland replication at 310 CMR. I have no further recommendations. This is Arthur Allen, Ecotech, submitted on June 5th of 2020.
Brad, can you tell us what this photo is depicting? Is this the replication area?
This is the overall photo. It doesn't have.
So that's the image that Ecotech submitted with the replication report. So I'm assuming that's the area of the replication area that was done.
Yeah, that's the belly.
But that, Rashid, that does not jive with what is shown on the plan for the replication. Correct? How did that vary from what the plan required you to put in? It was your plan, your presentation of it, and now Brad's trying to go out there and look for the shrubs that were depicted on your plan, and he's not finding them in the field. He's finding something else. So explain how that happened.
Well, first of all, the replication area, the area itself, we actually gave few feet more to provide, and then we actually, because this was the bridge we were constructing, the culvert,
Yeah.
we took that material and we used that material to replicate the area. And
Okay,
we
that's
did more.
fine. That's fine, but that's
think
not
the
talking
mistake-
about the shrubs and stuff.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. The mistake we made that we basically put boulders, and Brad didn't like the boulders, so we removed the boulders and we brought back the condition we have presented. So as far as the shrubs goes, I think Ecotech has reviewed and read all the shrubs we have placed. So that's what they're saying, because honestly, we don't know, what more to do. We have put all those shrubs there, and the wetland specialist, which is often used by the town, saying that it's done properly and there's no more recommendation. Matter of fact, this has been sitting there for 2 years, so that actually looks so original. It's difficult to differentiate between the original and replicated area.
All right, Brad, can you just comment to that? I mean, if this is a viable replication, but it's not per the plan, would you have a problem with that? Or
Well, I mean, that's up to the commission. So what the report says, essentially, from what I remember, I gave it a cursory review and looked at the photo, is that, the vegetation that's there, the area, the hydrology, that meets what a wetland should have. But keep in mind, when you condition and you want replication areas, sometimes you want indigenous species, you want things site specific. So if you're happy with the vegetation that's there, then I go out there and look at the report and concur with it, then it's a replication area that meets the minimum requirements under the statutes, and you can look at it that way. But if it's something that's you wanted more, again, like the woody material, something that's more swamp specific, what's there is more of a swamp, it's not a wet meadow or something of that instance. That's why when the plan's presented, we look for species that are more appropriate for, areas adjacent to the BVWs you're trying to replicate. So it doesn't meet the requirements of the permit because it's not what was on the permitted plan. So regardless of if it's a wetland or not, there's still the issue of it doesn't meet the commission's order at this point.
Okay.
So if you're comfortable accepting something different than that, then that's up to the commission.
Okay. I mean, there's nothing saying that we couldn't require some of the woody shrubs to be installed. I'm going to add Martha, can you chime in here? And you know the vegetation better than all of us, so.
There are many types of wetlands, types of wetland vegetation. Writing the order and the plan to replicate the wetland with certain woodier species, I assume the intent was to recreate the wetland that was destroyed. And if I'm remembering this project correctly, that original wetland had more woody vegetation in it. So while this fulfills the letter of definition of wetland vegetation, it does not fulfill the letter of the conditions and the plan that the commission under good faith allowed the construction to go forward with.
Okay. So what I'm recommending here or throwing out to the commission is, how hard is it, Martha, for them to go in and add those woody species to that area? The soils are there. We're not debating that.
If the soils are there, it's a relatively small expense and a relatively small labor to install.
If I may interject, Mr. Chairman, I have no object to add more, no problem at all.
Okay.
We are not closing this order today anyway. This was more of enforcement order based on those facts, because we have brought back the grade, which I think was under discussion, we would hope that the EO is lifted, and we would be gladly adding whatever you recommend or whatever was in the plan. No problem. We thought we did actually, in our understanding, by putting the boulders and stuff, we did above and beyond, but we brought back to what we originally presented, the grade. So we would be willing to put more species there, no problem at all.
Okay. I think that would solve the issue with the replication area, Rashid.
No problem.
So go back to the original plan, look at what species were identified there, because they obviously got the approval of the commission, and just add them, and we'll be done with that part of it.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
And then I think John has more in terms of, John, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we did provide, as Brad said, an updated plan that shows, it was from flags 12 through flag 19, a split rail fence that will parallel with the driveway, about 3 feet off the driveway. And then on the wetland side of the split rail fence, we are placing minimum 3 foot diameter, 3 foot diameter boulders along that stretch, again, from wetland flag 12 through 19. And just to clarify what Rashid was stating earlier is, again, when the his site contractor was constructing the area along the driveway, they did have a lot of boulders. They thought they were giving a better barrier when they were constructing that small boulder wall. Since then, I believe the site contractor was out there on end of last week, and he is regrading that to bring it back to what was approved on the site plan. So he's removing those boulders and grading that off between the limit of the wetland and the replication area up to the driveway. So that's being brought back into compliance with what was approved on the plan. There's one other item. Rashid has a buyer now that I believe he's under contract with for this house. And if you can look, right there. On the original approved plan, there was originally a 12 by 12 deck. What they are looking for, the new or soon to be owner, is in the area where the deck was. They want to do a sunroom, but that would still be on, well, I'll call them sonotube, but they have those helical, basically screws, so they screw those right into the ground. But basically, it's not a foundation. It's the same as a sonotube, except they just screw them into the ground, so there's no pouring of concrete and digging hand holes for sonotubes. They screw them right to the ground, so they will be on piers, and it's in the same location as where the original deck was, and then they would have on what would be the easterly side, away from the wetland toward the 100-foot buffer, a deck off of that. So we added that also to this plan, and we would ask if the commission would consider this also as like a de minimis change to what was the approved plan for the order of conditions for this site.
All right, I'll let Brad speak to that regarding an amended order versus a field change.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Right. So I updated the commission fairly recently. I've also had quite a bit of discussion with state officials regarding this, and they've actually met amongst section chiefs. So really, we shouldn't be making any changes to permits with these so-called de minimis changes or field changes or things of that nature. I could talk to you for hours about the problems we've encountered with that in Shrewsbury alone, which is part of the reason that I got together with state officials for clarifications on that as well. And give you an example, one of the DEP section chiefs was looking at an amended order simply to change a deck by widen it for a 2-foot increment, for instance. So these things really shouldn't be going outside of the general open meeting advertisement type process. So, changes like adding a sunroom, things of that nature, you even if it's minor, it still would require an amended order, or alternatively, if somebody wanted to file an RDA and the commission deemed it, worthy of a negative determination, that's an option as well. But simply asking for changes outside of public input and other things, it's not really the process that we should be doing. For this particular project, my suggestion would be, now that the commission finally has some of the items that was originally asked for in the order from a couple years ago, shown on the plan, why not incorporate all of these changes and then the addition of the sunroom and anything else that may take place between now and the next meeting, and simply have the applicant come in for an amended order for all of those items at once. That's one option that I would suggest.
All right, thanks, Brad. Does anyone on the commission have anything else to offer? All right. Well, John, I think you got the answer on that one, an amended order.
Okay, no, understood.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, so can we ask for negative determination tonight, or do we have to come back with?
No, you would that would have to be advertised and everything. Yeah. No.
Okay.
That was a good try, though.
Yeah. Okay. So are we all set on this particular site, Brad? For
now, I will look at it between now and the next meeting and see what's actually been going on. I do have some vacation coming up this week and next week, but sometime after that.
Okay.
It would be great if we could see you, Mr. Stone, with some, timing. If you could kindly let me know, so we could meet you there and make sure that everything is done according to your vision.
And in the meantime, we'll get together the paperwork for that amended order.
Sounds good, John.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. All right. Good night, guys.
Good night.
Okay, let's move on to extension permits. 935 Main Street. Brad?
Is John still here?
Yeah, John, hopefully. Did John, I know Rashid's still signed on.
Okay.
John, it doesn't look like John dropped off.
All right. Well, give me 1 second. Let me.
Do you want to call John back up into the meeting if we can? I don't know if you captured his phone number.
I did not.
Mr. Chairman, I can call him if you want.
Yes. Could you, Rashid, please?
Sure.
Tell him to log back in. Brad, are you pulling up a drawing? Okay, here it comes.
Okay, so can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so just in the interest of time, I'll start showing you some photos. So when we got the extended permit request and also the amended order request, I went out and started to take a look at the site. And in general, I'm concerned about the lack of oversight on stormwater controls. So, you know, a lot of the catch basins, any of the silt sacks, they don't look like they've been maintained in months out there. They're pretty full once you look inside them. More importantly, there's just exposed dirt everywhere, getting onto the road, getting into the detention ponds. Here's one, for instance. It's an exposed area that goes right into a detention pond. So anytime it rains, you're immediately going to get filthy water down in there. A lot of areas too, these, I'm not sure if they're just footing drains or if they're going to be the roof leaders as well. When you look at this photo, you can see some pipes daylighting out the side of a slope. And then there's some connected by the foundation, for instance. Doesn't look like the roof's connected yet, but there's areas that may have some active pipes, or they may be inactive at this point, but there's many of them that daylight out the side of the exposed slopes too. So if there's any water hitting those, that's going to be a concern. Just try to scroll around a little bit. Yeah, there's an example. That's going right into a detention pond. So that would be the sediment forebay, which, as you can see, is pretty much filling up from all the exposure. And then the pond would be on the downside of that. This is the building where the retaining wall was the amended order request, and you can see they have graded the slope without the wall, and that's what they intend to leave there. It's just more example of lack of maintenance. So here's a picture of the roadway, for instance. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to get out there when it rains, but it's just not left in the condition that you normally want to see it. Like here's a basin down towards the lower right that's on the pavement there. It's just got exposed dirt all around it. I don't think that one had a silt sack. This is a general overview. The commission may recall there was the concern with the slope at one point in the project, and then ultimately a wall that was built back here. That's had some ongoing issues, and the slope itself has some areas that looks like the vegetation hasn't taken, and there's eroded materials away from the jute netting that's there. You can see there's some of the reinforcement that's failing in some areas. The wider shot of everything there. And that's the wall that was built. And I think there's some repairs that they were working on, or some additional work that may or may not need to happen there too. I'm not up to speed with what's been going on with the planning board with respect to the wall. Yeah, and that looks like there may be a section that right in there that they had to do some work on. But I've just got some, general shots in here showing the areas that are still exposed out there. There's that other catch basin right in here.
Brad, are they required to be evaluating the site for the integrity
So in
of the controls?
in DEP standard language for the stormwater section, because it does apply to this project, stormwater management policy does apply to it. So yes, the commission, the state, anybody can be asking for reports of SWIP inspections, for instance. I did ask for any reports that they had from March of this year through last week. I sent that to Mr. Grenier, I think yesterday morning. as well as asking for a brief narrative of the outstanding work so that the commission had a better idea of what they're really asking the extension permit request for. So I haven't seen those yet.
Hey, Brad, this is John. I'm back on the phone.
Okay.
I did, I got your email. I did, this afternoon, it was near the end of the day. The day was slipping away from me. I did send in a brief narrative for, you know, what has and has not been done on the site. There are 6 foundations or 6 buildings that foundations need to be installed. That means there are 7 that are already in. Obviously there are various stages of construction. The first 3 buildings are in. The last one is unit number 12, and that's where you showed, that's where the retaining wall was going to be proposed. And they just graded that out. So the other 2 units, they're all stabilized. They put sod down. And in the rear of the site, as you see, everything's brought to pad, but they're getting ready to start doing more foundations in the upcoming months. So they, from what I hear from you, Brad, they do need to do some more, you know, maintenance, especially with silt sacks, and making sure that, you know, there aren't any issues with sediment flowing onto the site. They will have to clean out the basins. They are going to have to clean out the 4 bays and make sure that there's no silt in them. You know, obviously prior to wrapping those up, but they have been functioning. I've been out there after some rainstorms, and for the most part, on smaller storms, nothing has escaped the 4 bays. Not much has gotten into the main part of the basin. I am getting together. I have to get some additional information from the contractor on some of the specific items he's done for some of the reports. So I will be getting those into you within the next week. I can get those over to you. But at the end of the day, the order of conditions, it's been 3 years. We're looking to get an extension to complete the work. Of the 6 foundations that are remaining, there's only 2 that are within buffer zones in the rear portion of the site. The rest of them are more on the westerly side. So there's only 2 that are left that are within the buffer zones, but the lion's share of the cuts and fills has been done. The pads are ready. So they'll be ready to put those foundations in the next couple of months. And I also stated in that the update I gave you is, if they continue along at this pace, I would anticipate that by next spring, they should be wrapping up all the construction, and probably after next spring, they should be having everything stabilized, and be looking towards getting a certificate of compliance, probably late spring, maybe summer next year.
Okay. So I'll probably have some questions for John too, but I just want to finish scrolling through these photos.
Sure.
So here's an example of, you know, kind of like you just have massive amounts of exposed material, and all of that just washes right down into the detention pond area. It's really not good BMP practice to have, you know, that amount of exposed stuff right next to an area where you could get a discharge immediately outside of the pond. I have not had the opportunity to view the site during a rain event yet. You know, unfortunately, I mean, hopefully it rains sometime soon. But it's just looking at the site, it does have me concerned. I'd be very surprised if there isn't some issues out there when it does actually rain. Yeah, and then John, do you know if these are footing drains or if any of these are going to be roof leaders, or what are all the pipes for daylighting?
I'm fairly confident that all of those are perimeter drains, Brad, but I'd have to go out and confirm.
Okay, because some of the buildings, I did see the pipes standing up vertically at the building corners. You know, same pipe material, same size. So I wasn't sure if they went into the ground and then were made to discharge into the basins, or if something else was going on.
I don't know 100%. I'll have to go out and double check that.
And then getting towards the back of the site, there were some areas that had some concern. You can see here, the riprap has gone beyond the erosion control barrier, and right adjacent to that, there's a blue flag that's on the ground. I couldn't read any numbers on any of the flags that I saw. That stuff was long worn off, so I couldn't exactly pinpoint where I was. I knew the general area. There was a section of the plan where the riprap was pretty close to the existing wetland edge. So it could be that may be here, or it may be, you know, before or after that someplace. But the material's gone beyond the erosion control, and that itself, you know, here's another shot. It shouldn't happen like that. Everything should be up gradient of it. So things like that, John, you'll want to have them check on and fix as need be.
Okay. Yeah, I think I know where that is. That's on like the northern point. There is a, I'm looking at a reduced copy of the site plan. I think it's wetland flag 34-ish, and that's where the riprap goes pretty tight. There's one flag that comes in kind of at a point and comes in where that riprap is. So I'll double check. In all honesty, I haven't been back in that area, but I'll go take a look at that.
And do you have any updated information on the slope to the rear in that retaining wall that was constructed, and what's the status there, and what needs to be done, if anything, at this point? Not that particular one, but the one behind the buildings in this photo down in this area here.
Yeah, that's wall number one. It's a pre-engineered block wall system, and they noticed that there was an issue with some of the blocks. They had some cracks in them. So they have been dealing with the manufacturer and the licensed installer, and they're also have the town's consultant engineer, GZA, has been out to inspect it. And then so they're following the manufacturer's directions on replacing and fixing those blocks. And actually, I think GZA just issued a letter. I think it was like it was yesterday. I just took a look at it. It was either yesterday or today, with, you know, their recommendations on making sure that the manufacturer signs off on you know, the repair of some of those blocks. So they're working through the process with the engineering department on that.
In that slope that was the earlier issue, that's got reinforcement on it. It looks like a lot of the vegetation hasn't taken and it's fallen in areas. Is there a plan to try to reestablish that?
Yes, there is.
So you can see a bunch of the photos in here, kind of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was more or less. I just wanted to bring the commission up to speed of at least what I saw. You know, there needs to be some more oversight on the construction activity, at least. I haven't seen it during a rain event, so I don't know if there's really any wetland impacts at this point. You know, other than things like some material going beyond the erosion control. The basins certainly look like a really bad threat and a bad scenario waiting to happen. So there should be some plans to, you know, vegetate, you know, immediately anything that's upgrading to those, or put in erosion control BMPs or something Doesn't make much sense to have the basement stabilized if everything getting into it's unstable immediately adjacent to it. So it's just really a ton of good housekeeping that needs to happen there.
All right, and I'll relay that to the builder and directly with the site contractor. So I'll help facilitate that.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Bob.
John, in the interest of moving this forward, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
In the interest of moving this forward, you know, they're looking for an extension permit, right?
Correct.
And given what we've been hearing here and the kind of mess that this site is in, I'm certainly not inclined to talk about that tonight. I think this site ought to be brought up to shape. I think we're on the verge of an enforcement order here, rather than extension.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the only thing that I think saves John in this case was the fact that Baker's emergency order, I think, stayed all of the permit timelines.
Well, it didn't stay an enforcement order.
No,
and I think
correct. But I mean, in terms, speaking to the extension request,
yeah, so
that is in effect so that he does, you know, his timeline has been frozen. But you're right, Bob, this does need some serious work. And my question too, Bob, would be who is checking on this site on a daily or weekly basis? You know, there's just an endless list of items here that seem to need to be addressed.
Well,
John, can you answer that? Are you the responsible party here, or is it you know, project manager for the contractor?
No, they have a project manager for the contractor. I've not been hired to do that.
Okay. So how does this get relayed tonight? What we've told you to?
I'll be contacting the project manager directly, and I'm going to have a meeting with him and the site contractor. So I'll insert myself into the process.
Well, yeah, I think you have to, and you have to bring up Bob's point that, you know, he's teetering on an enforcement action here.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I don't think we should wait till next meeting to do. I mean, Brad, if this doesn't shape up pretty quick, we got to issue an enforcement order.
Well, I'd like to point out, Bob, there hasn't been any breach. There hasn't been nothing going into the wetland. You know, it is one of those sites that there is a lot of cut and fill. It is standing material. They haven't had any big issues with any blowouts or anything. And actually, they reinforced a lot of the erosion control with wood chips, which was an additional barrier, so that they wouldn't have any issues with anything going into the wetlands. But to Brad's point, there are areas that should get stabilized. There are areas that should get stabilized so that they don't have so much open area, and make sure that they do a lot of good housekeeping items as well. So I take his point, and I'll insert myself in there so that we make sure that we don't have any issues down the road.
Let's not forget, John, that it hasn't rained for 3 weeks. And from what I'm seeing in these pictures, if they represent the situation today, if they rain, we're going to get some. We're going to get a lot of silt off that site. So address it, please. I appreciate your projecting yourself into the process.
Okay, Bob. Thanks, Bob. So you got the message, John, on that, and that should also answer your question on the extension request, that you're not going to be seeing any action from the commission tonight.
Sure.
Tonight, okay, and
that's fine. I'll coordinate with the site super, and I'll insert myself into it. Make sure we have everything buttoned up, so that Brad can do an inspection prior to your next meeting. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Ken.
Where are your weekly SWIP reports? Where are your inspection reports? You're supposed to have those available on site.
I'll have to talk to the site super. Again, I wasn't hired to do that, Ken, but I'll talk to the site super so we can get those.
Shouldn't it be an independent person doing those reports?
That they've been doing between the site contractor and the job super, to my understanding, they should have those reports.
Okay.
All right, are we all set, Brad, on this one?
I'm all set.
Okay. Everybody on the commission all set tonight on this?
Yes.
Okay. All right,
Okay.
John, let us update Brad too after your meeting to tell him the feedback you're getting from that project manager.
I absolutely will.
Okay. All right.
I want to make sure that this goes smoothly. I don't want anybody having any issues, and I don't think anybody wants that.
Okay.
All right.
All
Thanks
right.
again.
Good night.
Have a good night.
You too.
Bye.
21 Russell Ave, Brad, extension permit.
Yes. So this one also the emergency order saved this particular applicant because we got a request for the extension permit that would not have been able to be issued by the commission because I think it expired last week actually. But the emergency order does keep the permit open, so the commission can extend it. I haven't been out to the site. I do remember the project. It was a pretty low risk site. It was one that had a wetland stream, actually, I think, up gradient of the construction activity. It's a street that abuts the west side of Dean Park, I believe. Not a part of the park that's been used, but that particular parcel. I'm familiar with a few of the homes there, and the resource area is behind it, and it's usually a little bit up gradient of the house construction or the houses that are there. I reached out to the engineer just for update on what's outstanding, and it's really just some landscaping and a little bit of the building work at this point. So they are requesting an extension for it at this time. Again, I haven't seen it, but knowing the project I have a hard time thinking that there's something drastically bad happening to the resource area there. So I'd be okay with the commission issuing it. And I can certainly follow up with inspections to make sure everything's going according to the plan there.
Okay. The last item, project updates. These are the DEP controlled superseding.
Yes. So I have gotten some correspondence, or quite a bit on both of those projects. Haven't had I got a fly in here, sorry. Haven't had a chance to go through everything. I did speak to the wetlands section chief a little bit regarding 280 South Quinsigamon Avenue. So DEP's continuing with their pursuant of getting the site rectified under that superseding order of conditions. And I'll have more updates once they actually finalize some things and get it out on paper as well. But they do seem to be on top of that one for us. 285 Springs, the wetlands consultant has been monitoring the erosion control for the project at a minimum to make sure that that's being maintained, because if you recall, the work was close to the wetlands area. I think the building itself was 8 feet from it. So I'll take some time and go through that and make sure there's no further issues there. But they're the two superseding order sites, and I don't want to say it's been at the bottom of my pile, but it hasn't been as high up as these active ones that the commission has to make decisions on. So when I get a little bit more time, I'll go through all of that correspondence and then take a look at the sites and then see if there's anything else that the commission needs to be concerned with there.
Okay. And that brings us to the end of our agenda. So does anyone on the commission have anything they want to discuss tonight beyond that? Or do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. Roll call. Martha. Roll call.
Aye.
Jason,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
Ken,
Aye.
John Ostrowski, aye. That does it.
All right. See you
Thanks,
next
guys.
month.
Good night, all.
Yeah, good night.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Everybody have a good one. Yep.